The wind screamed through the frozen valley, carrying sharp ice flakes that stung like tiny blades. The ground was hidden under a thick white sheet, and the sky was a heavy gray, pressing down on the lonely settlement. Most homes had their lights off, shutters closed, and fires burning inside. No one wanted to be outside in this kind of storm. No one. Except the shadow moving through the snow. The figure stumbled forward, wrapping a torn blanket tighter around their small frame. Her breath came out in short clouds, her fingers stiff and turning pale. Every step felt heavier, as if the snow was pulling her down. She could no longer feel her toes. Her lips trembled, whispering words to herself, just a little more. Just a little more. The houses ahead were quiet, their doors closed to strangers. She passed one, then another, but didn't stop to knock. She had learned long ago, if they saw her face, they would slam the door in fear or disgust. She was not one of them. She was an alien, and on this cold human frontier world, aliens without work or purpose were unwanted. But tonight, she didn't care about pride. She just wanted to survive until morning. Her vision blurred, her knees gave out, and she fell into the snow. For a moment, she wanted to stay there. It would be easier. No more running, no more hunger, no more fear. But then, she thought of what would happen if they found her body. They would laugh and say she deserved it. Her heart filled with a small spark of anger, and she pushed herself up again through the swirling snow. She saw a small cabin standing apart. From the others, it looked warmer, a soft golden light glowing from its single window. She didn't know why she chose that one. Maybe it was the way the chimney smoke rose steadily. Maybe it was because it felt safe. She forced her legs to move, stumbling up the small steps. Her frozen fingers pushed against the door, but it was locked. She knocked once, softly, then again, louder. Inside, a man sat by the fire, cleaning the barrel of an old rifle. Ethan. Coal was used to quiet nights. He liked it that way. Life at the edge of human space wasn't easy, but it was peaceful as long as you kept to yourself. When the knocking came, he frowned. No one visited him this late and in this weather. He set the rifle aside and stood. When he opened the door, the cold wind burst in, carrying snowflakes onto the floor, and standing there, shivering and half-frozen, was the strangest sight he had seen in years. She was small, her skin a pale silver tone, patterned with faint markings that looked like frost. Her hair was wet and clung to her face, her eyes wide, glowing faintly, met his with desperation. Before he could speak, she whispered in a shaking voice, "I can cook. I can clean. I can bear children. Just don't throw me out." Ethan froze, unsure if he'd heard her right. For a moment, he just stared, the wind rushing between them. Then instinct took over. He grabbed her arm and pulled her inside before the cold could finish the job. The door shut, the wind muted, and the warmth of the fire filled the room. But she didn't relax. She stood there like a cornered animal, clutching the torn blanket to her body. Ethan looked her over, noticing the bruises on her wrists, the thinness of her frame. Whoever she was, she hadn't eaten well in weeks. He went to the kitchen, poured hot water into a cup, and handed it to her. Her hands shook so much that he had to steady the cup for her. She drank slowly, her eyes never leaving him. "Who are you?" he asked finally. She hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. I don't have a name anymore," she said softly. Ethan frowned. "That's not how it works," he said. "Everyone's got a name, not me," she whispered, looking at the floor. "Not since they took it from me." The fire crackled in the silence. Ethan didn't know what to say. He'd seen alien refugees before, but this one. There was something different about her. She wasn't just running from the cold. She was running from someone outside. The storm raged on, through the window. Faint shapes moved in the snow. 3 figures carrying lanterns slowly making their way toward the cabin. The woman's eyes widened in panic. "They found me," she breathed. Ethan turned to the window again, his hand already reaching for the rifle. Ethan's eyes stayed on the shadowy figures outside, their lanterns. Swaying in the wind, the snow made them blurry. But he could see the glint of metal weapons. The woman stood frozen, gripping her blanket tighter, her breathing fast and shallow. "They will take me back," she whispered. "And if they do, I won't survive." Ethan turned to her, his voice low but firm. "Who are they?" Her lips trembled, but she shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Please don't open the door." The knock came, loud and heavy, shaking the wooden frame. "Open up. Human." A deep voice called, muffled by the storm. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured toward the back of the cabin. "There's a storage room. Go. Hide now." She hesitated, staring at him as if trying to read his soul. Then she nodded and slipped silently into the dark hallway, disappearing from sight. Ethan took a deep breath and opened the door just enough to see the visitors. 3 aliens stood in the snow, their thick armor plates covered with frost. Their faces were hidden behind half-masks, breathing tubes connected to small tanks. One of them stepped forward, eyes sharp. "We're looking for a runaway," he said, his voice carrying authority. "She's dangerous. Seen anyone unusual tonight?" Ethan kept his expression calm. "No," he replied, "just me." The alien's gaze moved past him, trying to peer into the cabin. Ethan stepped forward. "Blocking the view, storm's bad. You should move on." For a moment, it seemed they might push past him, but then the leader gave a short nod. "If you see her, report it," he said. They turned and trudged away, their lantern light fading into the blizzard. Ethan closed the door and locked it. He walked to the storage room and opened it slightly. "She's gone," he told her. Slowly, she stepped out, her eyes scanning the door as if expecting it to burst open again. "Who are you running from?" Ethan asked. Her gaze dropped to the floor. "They called it a contract," she said quietly. "But it was a chain, one I could never break." She pulled back the blanket just enough to reveal the faded brand burned into her shoulder. It was a symbol, sharp, curling lines that almost glowed in the firelight. She whispered, "Like I was a thing, not a person." Ethan's stomach tightened. He'd heard of alien slave rings before, but seeing the mark made it real. He poured her another cup of hot water and slid it across the table. She sat, her hands still trembling as she took it. For a while neither spoke, the storm's howling filling the silence. Finally, Ethan broke it. "So, what's your name?" She hesitated again. "They called me Lyra," she said softly, as if testing whether it was still hers. "Lyra," Ethan repeated, nodding. "Better than no name." Her lips curved slightly, almost into a smile. It was the first hint of warmth he'd seen in her, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a shadow of fear. "They'll come back," she said. "They never stop." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You said you can cook, clean, and bear children?" He asked carefully. She flinched but nodded. "That's what they wanted from me." "That's all they ever wanted." Her voice cracked at the last word, and she took a deep breath to steady herself. Ethan didn't know why, but a part of him couldn't just turn her away. Maybe it was the way she'd shown up on his doorstep, half dead. Maybe it was the way her eyes looked like they'd seen too much. Or maybe it was because she reminded him of what it meant to be human, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "You can stay here until the storm ends," he said finally. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with disbelief. "But I don't trust easily," he added, "so you tell me the truth." "No lies." She swallowed hard, then nodded. "I escaped 2 nights ago," she said. "They keep women like me." in a guarded compound, were given to powerful men, traded like gifts. When one of the guards got drunk, I ran. Her voice grew quieter. I don't even know where I was running to. I just kept moving until I saw your cabin. Light Ethan's jaw tightened. And now they're hunting you. Yes, she whispered. Her hands tightened on the cup. They'll try again. They'll hurt anyone who helps me. Ethan glanced toward his rifle, resting against the wall. Let them try, he said, his voice cold. The fire cracked, throwing dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm was still strong, but now, mixed in with the wind's howl, came a faint, metallic hum. Lyra's head snapped up, her expression turning pale. That's their patrol ship, she said. They're searching from above. Ethan walked to the window and peered out into the swirling snow. Faint red lights moved across the sky, sweeping over the ground like search beams. They're not going to find you, Ethan said, but deep inside, he knew the storm could only hide them for so long. The red light from the patrol ship swept across the cabin walls. It lingered for a second before moving on, but Lyra's breathing didn't slow. She stood by the fire, clutching her blanket so tightly her knuckles turned pale. They won't leave, she whispered. They'll wait until the storm passes. Ethan moved to the window, peering through the frost-coated glass. The ship's outline was barely visible through the snow. A small prep snoo, a small VO, a small hovering craft, moving slowly, scanning the ground farther away. Shadows of patrol figures cut through the blizzard, their lights bobbing like ghosts in the night. They're getting closer, Lyra said, her voice shaking. Ethan turned to her. If they find you, what will they do? She swallowed hard. They'll drag me back. Break me until I obey again. The way she said it, calm, certain, made Ethan's blood run cold. He grabbed his rifle from the wall, checking the chamber. You're not going back, he said, his voice low. Suddenly, a metallic thud hit the side of the cabin. Ethan froze, listening. Another thud. Then footsteps crunching in the snow just outside the door. Lyra's eyes went wide. They found us, she whispered. Ethan motioned for her to follow him quietly. They moved toward the back of the cabin, where a narrow door led outside to the frozen forest. He pulled it open, the wind rushing in, and the cold biting instantly at their skin. Go, he said. Stay low and move fast. They slipped out into the storm, snow swallowing their tracks as quickly as they made them. Behind them, the cabin door slammed open, heavy boots stomping inside. Ethan didn't look back. He just pushed Lyra forward, guiding her through the thick white haze. The wind howled in their ears, making it hard to hear anything else, but soon, faint shouts cut through the storm. They're following, Lyra gasped. Glancing over her shoulder, Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her down behind a snow-covered ridge. They crouched low, the icy air burning their lungs. Through the blowing snow, Ethan could see two dark shapes moving toward them. He raised his rifle but didn't fire. The storm would throw off his aim. Instead, he motioned for Lyra to crawl toward the cluster of tall pines ahead. The trees offered better cover, their branches heavy with snow. They moved slowly, every step careful to stay quiet, but Lyra's legs were weak, her body still recovering from the cold and hunger. At one point, she stumbled, nearly falling face first into the snow. Ethan caught her, pulling her back up. I can't, she panted. You can, he said firmly. Just a little more. A sudden beam of red light swept across the ground ahead of them. Ethan shoved Lyra against a tree, shielding her with his own body. The light passed. But now the sound of engines grew louder. The patrol ship was circling back. They're going to trap us, Lyra said, her voice almost lost in the wind. Ethan's eyes darted around, searching for a way out. Then he spotted it, a narrow, half-buried path leading down toward a frozen river. If they could reach it, the snow would hide their tracks completely. "Come on," he urged, taking her hand. They ran, sliding down the slope, snow kicking. Up around them, the cold bit into their skin like knives, but they didn't stop. The sound of shouting grew louder. The patrol had spotted movement. Ethan's boots hit the frozen river with a crunch. The ice creaked under their weight, but it held. They ran along the edge, moving as fast as Lyra could manage, above them. The red lights of the ship swept the area, but the overhanging cliffs and snow-covered trees shielded them from view. For a moment, it seemed they might make it. Then a sharp crack echoed behind them. A flare shot into the air, bathing the snow in harsh white light. Figures appeared at the top of the slope. The patrol had found the path. Lyra stumbled again, her legs giving out. Ethan didn't hesitate. He scooped her up, cradling her against his chest. She was light. Far too light for someone her size. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breathing ragged. "They'll catch us," she murmured weakly. "Not if I can help it." Ethan growled, pushing forward. The river curved sharply, and ahead. Ethan spotted a dark shape, an old wooden bridge, half broken. Beyond it, the mouth of a cave was just visible through the curtain of snow. If they could reach it, they'd be safe from the wind. And harder to find. The shouts behind them grew louder. A gunshot cracked. A blast of snow exploding near Ethan's feet. He didn't look back, just kept running. Every muscle in his body burned. But he didn't slow. They reached the bridge. The old wood groaning under his weight, halfway across, another shot rang out. Splintering the railing beside them, Ethan ducked low, shielding Lyra with his body until they crossed. Then they plunged into the cave, the darkness swallowing them. Whole. Inside, the air was still, the walls glittering faintly with frost. Ethan set Lyra down gently against the wall. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his in the dim light. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "Yes, I did." He replied, "Now rest." "We're not done yet." Outside, the storm howled, and the muffled sound of boots crunched closer. The patrol was still coming. And Ethan knew the real fight hadn't even started. The cave was cold, but compared to the storm outside, it felt like a shelter. The wind scream was muffled here, replaced by the soft dripping of melted ice from the ceiling. Ethan knelt by the wall, pulling a small flashlight from his coat. Its warm beam lit the frost-covered stone, casting long shadows. Lyra sat on the ground, her back against the wall, her blanket wrapped tightly around her. Her eyes were half closed. But she was awake. Ethan studied her quietly for a moment. The last time he'd seen someone this weak was during a famine on a frontier colony years ago. That memory had never left him. And now, seeing her like this, it stirred something inside him. He reached into his pack, pulling out a small ration bar. "Eat," he said. Holding it out to her, she hesitated, looking at it as though she wasn't sure if it was really for her. "It's fine," Ethan added. "You need it more than I do." Slowly, she took it, her fingers brushing his. She unwrapped the bar and began to eat. Small bites, chewing carefully. It was clear she hadn't eaten properly in days. "Why are they after you so badly?" Ethan asked after a moment. Her chewing slowed, and she stared at the ration in her hands. "I told you before," she said quietly. "They own me. At least they think they do." She glanced at him, her eyes glinting faintly in the dim light. "I was given to a warlord as property. I was supposed to cook for him, serve him, and when the time came, bear his children." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not ownership. That's slavery." She gave a small, bitter smile. "Where I come from, it's the same thing." For a moment, there was only silence. The wind outside seemed to press against the cave, as if trying to get in. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I can help you, but only if you're honest with me. No secrets, no lies. Her gaze searched his face, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. "You'd risk your life for a stranger?" She asked. "Not for a stranger," Ethan said. "For someone who's freezing, starving, and about to be hunted down. That's different." She looked down, her hands tightening around the blanket. "If I stay, if you help me, they will come after you, too. They will kill you." Ethan shrugged. "They'll have to catch me first." Her lips curved slightly, almost into a smile. "Then I'll make you a promise," she said softly. "I can cook, clean, so hunt if I need to. I can take care of your home, your land. And if you ever want a family, She trailed off, her cheeks flushing faintly. Ethan raised a hand to stop her. "I'm not helping you because of that," he said firmly. She looked away, a strange mix of relief and confusion crossing her face from deeper in the cave. A faint sound echoed, a dripping pattern that was wrong. Ethan's instincts flared, and he switched off the flashlight. In the sudden darkness, the sound of boots crunching faintly on stone reached them. "They're inside," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan moved quickly, guiding her deeper into the cave. The air grew colder, and the space narrowed until they had to squeeze through a narrow gap. Beyond it was a small hollow, just large enough for them to crouch. The darkness was complete. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat and Lyra's quick breaths. Beside him, the voices came closer, speaking in a language Ethan didn't understand. The alien patrol's footsteps echoed, their lanterns casting faint flickers of light through the crack in the stone. Ethan shifted slightly, gripping his rifle. One wrong move, and they'd be caught. After what felt like hours, the footsteps began to fade. The voices grew distant, then were swallowed by the storm outside. Ethan waited a few more moments before speaking. "They're gone," he said quietly. Lyra exhaled, her whole body sagging in relief. For the first time since she'd arrived at his cabin, she reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. "Thank you," she whispered. "If you hadn't opened your door, I would be dead now." Ethan looked at her in the faint light coming from the cave mouth. "I'm not doing this for thanks," he said. "Then why?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. Ethan thought about it for a moment. "Because no one should have to beg to be treated like a person." She was silent for a long time. Then, quietly, she said, "Then we have an agreement. I will help you, protect your home, do whatever you ask. As long as you never send me back." Ethan nodded. "Deal," he said, but deep inside, he knew keeping that promise would mean facing whatever was coming for her, and it was coming. Soon, outside, the storm was starting to fade, which meant their enemies would soon move faster. The chase was far from over. By morning, the storm had slowed to a steady fall of snow. The cave no longer shook with the wind, and pale light filtered through the entrance. Ethan stood near the opening, scanning the forest with careful eyes. No patrols in sight, at least. Not yet. He turned to Lyra, who was still wrapped in her blanket, sitting close to the small fire he had built from dry wood hidden in his pack. "We can't stay here," he said quietly. "They'll search every cave once the weather clears." Lyra nodded, but her movements were sluggish. Her body was still, weak from the days of running and the cold that had nearly killed her. "I can walk," she said, though her voice sounded more determined than her legs looked. They moved carefully through the snow, keeping close to the trees. Ethan knew the forest well. There were old supply trails from the days when humans first settled here, if they could reach one. They could circle back to his cabin without being seen, but the forest felt different today. Too quiet, as if the trees themselves were listening by the time they reached the edge of the settlement. The snow was falling more heavily again. The cabins looked peaceful, smoke rising from chimneys. But Ethan didn't head straight for his home. Instead, he took Lyra through a back path, avoiding open ground. They slipped in through the rear door of his cabin, shaking off the snow. Lyra sank into the chair by the fire, letting the warmth seep into her bones for the first time since he'd met her. She looked almost calm. Ethan poured her a mug of hot tea. She held it in both hands, eyes half closed in relief. But the peace didn't last long. A sharp knock came at the front door, not frantic, not loud, but deliberate. Ethan's instincts immediately tensed. He motioned for Lyra to stay silent and stepped to the door, opening it just a crack. It was his neighbor, a man named Harlan. He was older, with a weathered face and sharp eyes that never seemed to miss anything. "Morning," Harlan said casually. "Heard you had a bit of excitement during the storm?" Ethan kept his expression neutral. "Nothing here," he replied. "Just stayed in and kept warm." Harlan smiled. Thinly, funny. "'Cause I could have sworn I saw a strange figure near your place last night. Small, wrapped in a blanket. Didn't look like one of us." Ethan didn't answer, but his grip on the door tightened. Harlan leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You know the patrols are paying good credits for information. Could be easy money in these hard times. That so?" Ethan said, his voice cold. "Yeah," Harlan replied. "And all I'd have to do is point em in the right direction." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Harlan?" The older man shrugged. "A little something for my trouble. Enough to make me forget I saw anything." Ethan stared at him for a long moment. Then he closed the door without a word, locking it from the chair. Lyra watched him with a wary expression. "Who was that?" she asked. "Trouble," Ethan said simply. "The kind that talks too much." They spent the next hour in tense silence. Ethan kept checking the window, and sure enough, just before noon, he saw movement at the edge of the settlement. 3 armored figures, the same kind who had searched his cabin during the storm. Harlan stood with them, pointing in Ethan's direction. "They're here," Ethan said, his voice low. Lyra's face went pale. "I told you they wouldn't stop," she whispered. Ethan grabbed his rifle and a small pack. "We're leaving." Now Lyra stood, still clutching her blanket, and followed him out the back door. The snow crunched softly under their boots as they moved quickly toward the forest again. But this time, they weren't running into the unknown. This time, the hunters knew exactly where to look. Shouts rang out behind them. The patrol had spotted their movement. Ethan led Lyra through a narrow deer trail, the snow-covered branches whipping at their faces. A gunshot cracked, splintering the trunk of a tree beside them. "They're getting closer," Lyra cried. Ethan pushed her forward. "Keep moving." They ran, the forest blurring around them. But soon, the sound of boots on snow grew louder. The patrol was closing in fast. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from behind a tree ahead. It was Harlan, holding a small pistol. "Easy there, Ethan," he called, his voice smug. "Just hand her over, and maybe they'll let you walk away." Ethan didn't slow. "You sold out your own people, Harlan," he said. "She's not one of us," Harlan shot back. "And neither are you if you're willing to die for her." In a flash, Ethan raised his rifle. "Move," he ordered, his voice like ice. Harlan hesitated, and that hesitation was all Ethan needed. He stepped forward, knocking the pistol from Harlan's hand with the rifle's stock. Lyra slipped past him, her eyes wide with fear. Behind them, the patrol's shouts grew louder. Ethan and Lyra ran again, leaving Harlan cursing in the snow. The trees thinned ahead, and the frozen river came into view. It was their only chance if they could cross and lose their tracks. They might escape, but as they reached the riverbank, the deep hum of engines filled the air. The patrol ship swept into view overhead, its red searchlight locking onto them. Lyra's grip on Ethan's arm tightened. "They've got us," she breathed. Ethan's eyes scanned the river, searching desperately for any cover. And then he saw it, a half-collapsed ice tunnel formed by the current years ago. It might be unstable, but it might also be the only way to disappear. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the ice tunnel. The cold air burned their lungs, and the snow crunched loudly beneath their boots. Above them, the patrol ship hovered, the red searchlights slicing through the gray sky. "They'll see us if we're too slow," Lyra shouted, fear in her voice. Ethan didn't answer, only kept running. The river's edge was jagged with frozen chunks of ice, and each step threatened to break the brittle surface. He leaped first, testing the ice, then turned to help Lyra. Her feet slipped slightly, but he caught her arm, steadying her. "Trust me," he said, his voice firm. She nodded. Swallowing her fear and followed his steps, the ice tunnel yawned before them. Dark and narrow, its walls glistened with frozen water, icicles hanging like crystal teeth from above. Ethan crouched low, motioning for Lyra to do the same. Together, they slipped inside, the darkness swallowing them. Once inside, the sounds of the patrol above faded, replaced by a dripping echo from the tunnel walls. Lyra's breath came in short gasps. "Is it safe?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's safer than out there," Ethan replied. Scanning the tunnel with his flashlight, the beam cut through the black, revealing a winding path that disappeared into deeper shadows. They moved carefully, stepping over ice ridges and water puddles. Every step echoed loudly in the narrow space. Lyra flinched each time. "You'll get used to it," Ethan said softly. "Just keep moving." She nodded again, gripping his hand tightly, drawing strength from his presence. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a wider cavern. The walls were smooth, polished by centuries of water flow. A small underground pool reflected the dim light, and the air was slightly warmer here. Ethan knelt beside it, cupping water in his hands. Lyra knelt beside him, drinking slowly, savoring the cool taste. She hadn't realized how thirsty she was. Ethan surveyed the cavern, his mind working quickly. "This place can be a shelter, but we need to make it livable," he said. He took out a small thermal blanket and some supplies from his pack. Lyra watched him, eyes wide with awe. "I've never had someone do this for me," she said quietly. Ethan smiled faintly. "Then consider it a start," he said, her lips curved slightly into a small, grateful smile. They worked together to make the cavern more secure. Ethan found ledges for sleeping. Lyra gathered dry moss and leaves to make it softer. She even used her hands to shape small stone walls to block drafts. Despite the cold and exhaustion, she laughed softly at the awkward piles of moss she made. Ethan chuckled too, a rare moment of lightness in their tense world. Hours passed, and the storm outside began to fade completely. But danger was not gone. Ethan knew the patrol would search every possible hideout eventually. He had to prepare for that moment. He checked the tunnel entrance, placing small noise traps with stones and icicles. If anyone tried to follow them, the sound would give them an early warning. Lyra sat close to him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. "You know," she said, "I've never trusted anyone before." "Not like this." Ethan kept his eyes on the tunnel, but his hand brushed hers gently. "Trust is earned," he said quietly, "and right now we both need it to survive." Her eyes met his, shining with a mixture of fear and relief. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. They ate small rations together, sharing what little food Ethan had. The fire he made from driftwood lit the cavern dimly. Outside, the wind howled faintly through the ice tunnel, reminding them that the world above was still dangerous, but inside this hidden place, they had a moment of peace. Ethan looked at Lyra and thought about the days ahead. They would need to move again, to avoid the patrols and find a safer place. But for now, they were alive, and that was enough. Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. "Will we ever be safe?" she asked softly. Ethan hesitated, then said, Safe is a place we make together. And right now, this is the safest place we have." She nodded, letting out a long breath for the first time. She felt a little bit of control over her life. And she realized that this human, this stranger who had opened his door in the storm, was more than just a protector. He was her ally, her only hope. And maybe, in time, something more outside. The storm's remnants melted into silence. Inside, the fire flickered, casting shadows on the ice walls, and for a few hours, at least, they were safe. The fire in the cavern had burned low, leaving faint embers glowing in the dim light. Ethan and Lyra packed their small supplies carefully, knowing every second counted. Outside, the forest was quiet. But Ethan's instincts told him it was a false calm. The patrols were relentless, and Harlan's betrayal had only made them more determined. "Ready?" Ethan whispered. Lyra nodded, gripping his hand tightly. They slipped back into the narrow ice tunnel, moving cautiously. Every step echoed against the frozen walls, and shadows danced around them. The air was damp and smelled faintly of minerals. But it was safer than the open forest as they emerged from the tunnel. The forest stretched ahead, white and silent. The snow had melted slightly from the storm, leaving soft mud underfoot. Ethan led the way. Scanning for tracks or movement, he knew the patrol ship had probably left the area, but human eyes could still be anywhere. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind them. Lyra froze. Fear flashing across her face, Ethan spun around, rifle raised. A patrol soldier stepped into view, weapon pointed at them. "Stop!" The soldier shouted. Ethan's mind raced. There was no cover here, only open ground. He had to think fast. "Run!" he yelled, grabbing Lyra's hand. They bolted through the forest, leaping over fallen logs and slipping through patches of mud. The soldier fired, the bullets whistling past. One struck a tree near Ethan, splintering the bark. Lyra screamed. Ethan pushed her forward, keeping his focus on getting them both to safety. The forest opened into a frozen creek, partially hidden by snow. Ethan made a split decision: they would cross it, even if the ice was thin. He tested a patch first, then motioned for Lyra to follow. Step by step, they crept across, the ice cracking faintly under their weight. But it held, just enough. Once on the other side, they ran straight into the dense trees, hoping the patrol would hesitate at the creek. Hours passed as they ran, their breaths forming clouds in the cold air. Ethan led Lyra to an abandoned ranger station he knew from childhood. The small wooden building was mostly intact, with a roof that had survived the storm inside. They barricaded the door with old furniture. Ethan checked the windows. Thin slats of wood blocked them, but enough to hide from casual eyes. Lyra sank to the floor, exhausted, shivering. "I can't." "Keep running," she whispered. Ethan knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We won't have to," he said softly. "We just need to wait until they give up or the patrol moves on." She leaned against him, trusting him completely now. For the first time, she felt a spark of safety. Even if it was temporary, outside, the forest was quiet again. The kind of silence that made every sound seem louder. Ethan kept watch, rifle ready, ears straining for the faintest noise. He knew Harlan could appear at any moment. Or worse, the patrols could be circling back, trying to trap them. Hours turned into the night. Lyra slept fitfully on the floor, exhausted from the chase and the fear. Ethan stayed awake, scanning, listening. Planning their next move, he thought about the path they would take, where the patrols were least likely to search. They had to move carefully, avoid roads, and use the forest to their advantage. By dawn, the first hints of light crept through the broken windows. Ethan packed their supplies again, ready for the next leg of the journey. Lyra stood beside him, gathering courage from his calm. "Where now?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked out toward the horizon. Where the forests met a distant ridge, we head toward the ridge, he said. There's a valley beyond it. Fewer patrols, safer for now. Together, they slipped out of the ranger station. Keeping low, moving silently, every step felt like a gamble. Every shadow a potential threat. But for the first time, Ethan saw something in Lyra. Determination. A spark of life that hadn't been there before. She wasn't just surviving. She was fighting alongside him, trusting him, and believing in a future beyond fear. Hours later, as the sun rose higher, the forest changed, the trees thinned, and the ridge came into view. Ethan led Lyra to a hidden path he had noticed years ago, a faint trail that curved down into the valley. They moved carefully, the valley's cover giving them a better chance of escape. From above, it looked like a ribbon of green and white cutting through the snow, perfect for hiding from aerial patrols. Ethan paused at the edge of the ridge. Looking back once, the patrols were nowhere in sight. Harlan gone. Lyra took a deep breath, hope filling her chest for the first time in weeks. "You did it," she whispered. Eyes shining, Ethan didn't answer, only nodded. He knew the journey wasn't over, but for now, they were free. The valley below promised safety, even if temporary. Ethan took Lyra's hand. Guiding her down the slope, step by step, they disappeared into the forest, leaving the snow, the patrols, and the danger behind. For the first time, they were running toward hope instead of away from fear. And in that moment, amidst the cold and the silence, a bond had formed, unspoken, strong and unbreakable. The forest swallowed them. Their footprints covered by fresh snow. The sun rose fully now, lighting the world anew. Ethan and Lyra walked together, side by side, two souls from different worlds, united by survival, trust, and the promise of a future beyond the storm.